For all you slow motherfuckers, I'ma break it down iller. Supreme was the businessman and Prince was the killer.
Before he became a rap mogul, before he dominated music, movies, and TV, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson was just a kid from the streets of South Jamaica, Queens. A place ruled not by mayors or police, but by gangsters. In 2000, 50 Cent released a track so bold, so revealing, that it nearly got him killed. This is the story of a song called Ghetto Quran, a song that turned Southside Jamaica, Queens into a war zone. Before Curtis Jackson became 50 Cent, everyone called him Boo Boo. His mother, Sabrina, was 15 when she gave birth to him on July 6, 1975. Brina, as she was known, sold drugs from an apartment on Old South Road in South Jamaica to support him. At age 23, Brina was murdered, and Curtis found himself under the care of his grandparents. He was told his mom would not be coming home. Rumors swirled that she had been drugged, and her apartment had been rigged to explode. No one was ever arrested for Brina's murder. Competing with his uncles in the house, Curtis often got the short end of the stick. At weekend parties, his drunken uncles would send him to pick up 8 balls of coke for their own personal use. Deprived of attention and in such close proximity to drugs, he eventually began selling cocaine to his uncles himself. By 12, he was hustling crack. He took boxing, carried guns, learned discipline and chaos. He wasn't flashy. He studied the moves of older gangsters, listened, observed. He watched as powerful men ran the streets, and he remembered every name. At age 19, life began to catch up with Curtis. He was arrested twice in 2 weeks for crack possession. He then learned from his grandmother that his mother had been murdered. Soon after that, his girlfriend Shaniqua Tompkins became pregnant. The thought that he could die in the streets, as his mother did, and leave his child unprotected, forced him to fall back. Inspired by local Queens rappers, Curtis looked to hip-hop as an escape route. Using the name 50 Cent, the nickname of a deceased Brooklyn stick-up kid, as his stage name, the music industry had no idea what was about to happen. 50 befriended Queens hip-hop legend Jam Master Jay. Jay helped him with songs, chorus, hooks, bars, setting the structure. Jay would eventually get 50 a record deal with Columbia Records. In 1999, 50 began working on his debut album, Power of the Dollar. It was raw, gritty, and powerful. But one track stood out the most, a song called Ghetto Quran. Over a haunting beat, 50 named names. It was part history lesson, part confession, laying out the hierarchy of the Queen's drug game from an insider's perspective. It was a dangerous move. When Columbia Records heard Ghetto Quran, alarms went off. The track was too real, too specific. It wasn't just street storytelling. It was considered dry snitching. Rumors spread quickly. Word on the street was that 50 had broken the unspoken code. He had exposed real street figures. Many of them were still active, or still had connections in the drug game. One of the names mentioned in the song was Kenneth Supreme McGriff, the alleged kingpin of the Supreme Team, a feared drug organization with deep ties all throughout New York City. 50 had just crossed a line. On May 24, 2000, everything changed. Outside his grandmother's home, 50 was ambushed. A gunman fired 9 shots at close range. 50 was hit in the hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and famously, the jaw. He survived, but just barely. While no one was ever officially charged in the shooting, street speculation pointed fingers at individuals associated with Supreme McGriff. Many believed that his song Ghetto Quran was the motive. The track had made 50 Cent a liability and a target. But how could one song bring someone to murder? Well, let's examine the song. Without a doubt, the first name drop is Supreme. But let's start it off with an 80s Queens drug lord by the name of Fat Cat. Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols was known as the godfather of South Jamaica. He ran a multi-million-dollar crack and heroin empire in Queens during the 1980s. Fat Cat was feared for his violence and known for ordering hits, including one on his own parole officer. He was sentenced to 25 years to life, with an additional 40-year RICO sentence for drug distribution.
I used to idolize Cat. Hurt me to my heart to hear that nigga snitched on Pat. How you go out like that?
In the Ghetto Quran, 50 calls out Fat Cat for being a confidential informant, leading to the conviction of his friend and right-hand man, Howard Pappy Mason.
Both for one depressor too. They know what they facing. Go against crews like Bebo and killers like Pappy Mason.
Howard Pappy Mason was a stone-cold gangster and drug kingpin. He was partners with Fat Cat Nichols. Together, they ran their own crew called the Bebos. Pappy Mason was known for ordering the murder of NYPD officer Edward Byrne in 1988, a killing that rocked the nation. He became the poster child for urban drug violence and was locked away for life in the federal supermax. Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols was released in 2023. Pappy Mason is still serving his life sentence. Maybe 50 was right. Maybe Fat Cat did snitch on Pappy Mason. The history between 50 Cent and Fat Cat goes back to when he was a child and his mother Brina was selling drugs independently near Fat Cat's building. She never asked for Cat's permission or protection, a brave and perhaps fatal choice.
You hear talk of the Southside, you hear talk of the team. See niggas feared Prince and respected Preem.
The Supreme Team was Fat Cat's major muscle on the streets in the 1980s. They ran the Baisley Projects and controlled crack distribution in developments across Queens, including the famous Queensbridge projects. The Supreme Team was ruthless. They killed dozens, including their ops, shady members who flipped, and even their own suppliers. In 1987, Supreme was arrested at his stash spot on 116th Avenue, his face covered in the cocaine he was trying to flush. He was sentenced to 12 years for federal narcotics conspiracy charges. Supreme was paroled in 1995. After Supreme was arrested, his nephew Gerald Prince Miller took over with an iron fist. Prince was a killer, a methodical enforcer, and manager of Supreme's drug territory. He and his uncle Supreme were known as the Cash Money Brothers. Like his uncle, he too was eventually arrested. In 1993, Prince was sentenced to life in prison for RICO drug charges. He was released in 2024. Now back to the star of the show. Shortly after 50 Cent was shot, Columbia Records dropped him, and Power of the Dollar was shelved. The industry turned its back on him. For 2 years, 50 Cent was unofficially blackballed. No label would sign him. He was labeled radioactive. Music executives were afraid to even stand next to him. But instead of quitting, he went underground, recording over 30 mixtapes in 2 years. He formed his own crew, G-Unit, recruiting friends from his South Jamaica Queens neighborhood, rapidly dropping music, and began building a loyal street following. Then in 2002, Eminem heard one of his mixtapes, Guess Who's Back, which featured songs that were on the Power of the Dollar album that were never released, including Ghetto Quran, which was also M's personal favorite. Long story short, M flew 50 to LA. Dr. Dre co-signed. Shady Aftermath signed him with $1 million signing bonus. The rest was history. When Supreme came out of prison in the mid-90s, the streets said he wanted to go legit, and he set his sights on the hip-hop industry. Enter Murder Inc. Murder Inc. Records, founded by Irv Gotti, had the hottest run in early 2000s hip-hop. Their star artists, Ja Rule and Ashanti, were topping the charts. But behind the platinum records and flashy videos, rumors swirled that Supreme was quietly backing the label. There was even buzz that Supreme was funneling street money into Murder Inc. as a silent investor, though Irv Gotti always denied this. 50, however, didn't. In interviews and on records, he hinted at Supreme's influence. naming names and throwing shots. It wasn't subtle. It was personal. Murder Inc.'s top star, Ja Rule, also had a history of bad blood with 50 Cent. Their beef wasn't about music at first. It started in the streets. In 1999, Rule was filming a music video in 50's neighborhood in South Jamaica. A mutual friend of 50's allegedly robbed Rule at gunpoint, taking his gold chain. Rule later saw 50 hanging with the guy who robbed him and felt disrespected, like 50 was behind the robbery as well. Rule would later badmouth 50, leading to 50 dropping a diss track called Your Life's on the Line. The track was also on 50's Power of the Dollar album. In 2000, 50 Cent and Ja Rule's crews got into a fight at the Hit Factory studio in New York City. 50 was stabbed during the altercation. From that point on, the beef was irreversible.
Head Luke, Mel's son, Troy and E-Money bags in a conversation over shrimp and lobster.
On the last verse of Ghetto Quran, 50 name drops two particular Queens gangsters, Eric E. Moneybags Sniff and Big Nose Troy Singleton. Both were feared in the streets, both hustlers, both killers, and both had their own issues with the Supreme Team. E. Moneybags was an infamous street figure from Queensbridge projects. He was known for his flashy lifestyle, big chains, foreign cars, and stacks of money. Bags was well connected, not just in the streets, but in the hip-hop world. He had strong ties to Nas, Mobb Deep, and 50 Cent, who name-dropped him often in early songs. The beef between E. Moneybags and the Supreme Team started all because of $1,000. Rumor has it, Bags purchased a vehicle from an associate of the Supreme Team. Bags gave the associate $1,000 down payment. He would later change his mind and ask for a refund. Supreme was not having it. He dismissed Bags and refused to give him a refund. This would escalate a street war that would shake Queens down to the core. Enter Big Nose Troy. Big Nose Troy Singleton, who 50 also name-dropped on Ghetto Quran, was also an infamous stick-up kid and hustler from Jamaica, Queens. Like E. Moneybags, Troy also had his share of issues with the Supreme Team, dating back to a shooting in which a Supreme Team member snitched on Troy. Now the streets were divided. Either you were with the Supreme Team or against them. And E. Moneybags, Big Nose Troy, and 50 Cent were not afraid of Supreme. E. Moneybags was on a mission to kill Supreme, and nothing was going to get in his way. In 1999, he would get his opportunity. Bags caught Supreme sitting inside his Range Rover near the Jamaica Coliseum Mall. He pulled up by the SUV and let off shots aimed directly at Supreme. In the aftermath, Supreme would survive, but his friend who was sitting in the passenger side would not. That man was a well-respected lieutenant of the Supreme Team, Black Just. Culber Black Just Johnson was very well respected and loved throughout Queens. He was also 50 Cent's mentor, shaping his boxing skills. The loss of Black Just was hard for everybody in Queens. With the accidental murder of Black Just, E. Moneybags had now made more enemies than he ever imagined. A few years passed by, and Murder Inc. was on top of the world. Ja Rule was making hit after hit, and Supreme was making more money than ever, using Murder Inc. as a cover to launder drug money. But in the streets, two men were still terrorizing Queens. Big Nose Troy and E. Moneybags were running wild, robbing anybody associated with Murder Inc. and the Supreme Team. One incident involved Big Nose Troy roughing up Murder Inc. boss Irv Gotti. Supreme had enough. He assembled a hit squad and went to war. On July 16, 2001, E. Moneybags was sitting in his Lincoln Navigator SUV outside a friend's home. A masked gunman approached the vehicle, shooting Bags 10 times. He died on the spot. The shooter, a known hitman for the Supreme Team, was paid $50,000 to carry out the hit. The order came directly from Supreme, who wanted revenge for the death of his old friend Black Just. 3 months later, Big Nose Troy Singleton was gunned down as he was leaving a sports bar in South Jamaica. Another hit ordered by Supreme. This was payback for Irv Gotti, whom Troy had assaulted months before. The murder sent a chilling message to everybody in Queens. In 2003, it all came crumbling down. The FBI raided the Murder Inc. offices and arrested everybody. Supreme was charged with drug trafficking and murder for hire. Irv Gotti and his brother Chris Gotti were charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering. In 2005, Irv Gotti and his brother were acquitted of their charges, but they were also wiped out. The Fed case cost them everything. The Feds were really strategic. They knew they had nothing on Murder Inc., but they had a lot on Supreme. So how do we take down Supreme? You wipe out his funds, which in this case was Irv Gotti and Murder Inc. Without financial support, Supreme couldn't even afford legal representation. On February 1, 2007, Supreme was convicted of murder for hire and drug trafficking. The Feds put Supreme away for life, without the possibility of parole, for the murders of Eric E. Moneybags Smith and Big Nose Troy Singleton. The Feds also believe Supreme was responsible for the murder of Jam Master Jay in 2002 and the attempted murder of 50 Cent in 2000. 50 never cooperated. So what happened to 50 Cent? Well, for starters, his debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts in 2003 and has sold over 13 million copies worldwide. 50 became a rap icon. Maybe he lost the battle, but 50 definitely won the war. He is now a billionaire. Kenneth Supreme McGriff is still in prison serving his life sentence. 50 Cent wrote a song he wasn't supposed to write. Ghetto Quran was more than a song. It was a prophecy. And 50 lived to tell the ending. To this day, the song remains unreleased. What do you think? Did 50 Cent break the street code with Ghetto Quran, or just expose a truth that was already written? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications for more dope videos, courtesy of the Health Wealth Diary.